Another fantastic year of Gruden's QB camp. We got guys like Teddy Bridgewater, Johnny Manziel, and Blake Bortles. But there's one guy. This guy, I've always wanted to see this guy in the quarterback chair.
Good to see you, man.
See you, Coach.
I'll tell you what. You look pretty good over there, man. It's a little intimidating being over there, isn't it?
It's about to get a little intimidating over there, isn't it?
I'll tell you what. I'm going to need to clean up on aisle 5 after that look, man.
I'll tell you what, you might.
Things might have started out a little rocky, but I'll tell you what, after a little while, we started seeing eye to eye, man.
Charles Barkley. I think that is going to be a very easy game for my guys. You look at this, you're going to have to be a knucklehead to pick against all. Don't be a knucklehead, Lee.
No, I won't.
Don't be a knucklehead.
Thank you for coming to Trump Confessionals, the #1 confessional in not just the United States, but the entire world, and that includes the Vatican. It really does.
I got in an argument with my neighbor. It was over this wall that I built between our properties.
I'm trying to absorb this. You built the wall?
Yes, I did.
Then make him pay for it.
I can ask him.
No, you tell him. Asking will get you nowhere. You just tell people what to do. It's in my book, The Art of the Deal. This has been fun. Go say 5 R. Donalds and 3 Hail Melanias.
If you could only have one guy, just one guy, that you put in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I don't know why that would be. Maybe because there's a small Hall of Fame, and there's a fire inspector that says you can only have one guy that can go in that Hall of Fame. That guy, that guy's going to be Brett Favre. He could do things on the field that nobody else could do. He could do things most people couldn't even imagine doing. But as amazing as Brett Favre, the player, was, let me tell you about Brett Favre, the man.
Hey, what's up? My name is DJ Eitzen, co-founder and COO of Limitless Minds, and today we have actor, comedian Frank Caliendo. He's been on Fox Sports Sunday, Mad TV, ESPN. He's really made a great career out of acting and also being a comedian, doing impressions. But what you're going to learn about today is his career, some of the people that he's interacted with that have really inspired him, some of the things that have inspired him, and his balance with family and life and how he's coping during these times. So Trevor does a nice job of peeling the onion back on some of these things with Frank, and I hope you guys enjoy the webinar. So with that, off to you, Trev.
Thank you, DJ. We're excited actually to get to spend some time today with a friend of mine who I met through Russell Wilson, our co-founder, and his agent, Mark Rogers, at a couple Seahawks games, I think against Arizona and Seattle. But Frank Caliendo, and one of the reasons I wanted to interview Frank, many of you have seen him perform in sports venues and comedic venues in a variety of different things. But to me, Frank has found a way to make himself relevant across sort of a variety of stages. I think many people can recognize Frank, can recognize his personalities, recognize his sense of humor. And to me, I know Frank and I may have a debate on this, but he's found a way to get to the very top of a field that in part he sort of uniquely found a way. It's not like you could go to college and there are hundreds of these types of jobs. And more importantly than that, he's found a way to be relevant, which means in big moments, in big events, he has an opportunity to perform because he's good enough to come in and add value. And also, I think people who have an incredible sense of humor, boy, we could use a little bit of that at this time where it feels so serious and you feel like if your right leg hurts, you're going to die, and it's such a unique challenge. But Frank, first of all, thank you for joining Limitless Minds, for joining Russell, Harrison, DJ, and myself. And could you give us just a little bit of a background on like the early origins of Frank Caliendo?
Well, let me start with this. I was a really quiet kid, and people are amazed, family members and stuff like that are amazed that when they found out that I was doing comedy, and as I was starting to succeed in comedy. But I was a really quiet kid, always wore collared shirts. I'm rebelling now at this point with always athletic type of shirts with no athletics going on. But I was quiet. Then through high school, I started to be a little bit sarcastic as I got into middle of high school. And then I went to college. I went to school for broadcast journalism. I thought I wanted to be a sports anchor of sorts, maybe an ESPN type of anchor. And after visiting ESPN later, realizing I didn't have the right type of mind for those stats to be able to recall as much and throw them out there. I might have had a little bit of the comedic flair, but I look at, I looked at that and saw, wow, I guess my little tangent I went on as far as comedy was much better for me. So I started, I got my broadcast journalism degree from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And then I started trying to do comedy. I was working at a golf course part-time, working indoor baseball, softball, batting cage. There, worked for a guy named Mike Hegan, who used to be in the A's organizations, was the announcer for the Cleveland Indians. He was a brewer as well. And I just tried doing clubs, and I was the only person doing impressions at the time. So nobody was really, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't TikTok. None of this stuff existed. So I started doing impressions, and nobody was really doing that in stand-up because it was so vaudevillian. The impressions, an impressionist, everybody thinks, old school thinks of Rich Little. There are people like John Byner, some people like that. They were very vaudevillian, and it didn't evolve. So people were doing impressions, but their act was, what if Ed Sullivan was eating a hamburger? And everybody's like, well, why would he do that? So I started writing an act that was around observations of different people. So for example, if I took Al Pacino, I'd say, what is acting about? Acting's about being curious and knowing nothing and learning as you go. So if Al Pacino walked into a room and had never seen a light switch before, he goes, wait a second, you flip a switch over there and a light goes on over here? Whoa, this is sorcery. So I started taking on little bits of people and making observations and then applying them in a stand-up comedy act. So I just started applying that, and I wrote my act around that, and it was about writing more updated versions of an impressionist act as opposed to just doing simple everyday things with the voices and impressions for no reason, but actually having a reason and talking about things I'd seen in reality. So I started doing that. I got on the college circuit because I was only 20.
But Frank, like where did you even come up? Was there something in college? Was there something like you said? Because I remember Rich Little, and I remember some of those things. But like, I'm such a believer in like creating a value proposition for yourself, something about you that's either better than other people, or something that's distinct and unique.
Well, a niche, right? A niche would be that. And in comedy, a lot of times it's the thing you use to get yourself famous. You have two careers. You have a career that you build something and you build a brand that everybody knows, and then you spend the rest of your career trying to figure out how to broaden beyond that and not be in that label. If you look at Jim Carrey, and I didn't understand this as a kid, I didn't understand this until I got to a certain level. Jim Carrey was just, hey there, fella, we doing okay? He's like, I want to be a serious actor. And everybody's like, well, you're the king of comedy. You are, literally Rupert Pupkin, the king of comedy. You're literally the king of comedy at that point. Why would you do anything else? Because it gets boring doing the same thing over and over and over. And you've kind of reached the peak at that. Why are you going to keep doing the same thing? And you want to broaden on to be something else. For me, it was sports impressions, right? So I started doing, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster of some sort. I wanted to be in that niche because I knew a little bit about sports. My dad was a minor league baseball player. I played AAU baseball, had friends that played AAU basketball. I was around a lot of pretty good athletes, some that made their way even to the major leagues, and some played college and stuff like that. So growing up, I was around some decent athletes until you find out what it's like. In retrospect, to go back and go, that guy's an amazing athlete. Then you look at an actual pro athlete and you're like, they're not even close. It's not the mental, physical, everything. But I digress there. But so I knew I could do some impressions. The guy who's actually the head coach of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee baseball team, Scott Duffick, he used to work at Mike Egan's as well. And we would walk around just doing, in minor leagues, there's nothing to do. So those guys are always messing around, listening to the Jerky Boys back in the day, the Musacha tapes and that kind of stuff. And they're doing impressions and messing around, doing Caddyshack, Spalding, I want you on the golf course in 5 minutes. So we're just doing all that kind of stuff, playing around. And I'm getting better and better at it as I'm working at those batting cages. I get into college and I start messing around with that. It's in entertainment, but it's, sports entertainment. And at the time, sports and entertainment were not as merged as they are now. Remember, it used to be sports was one thing and entertainment was something completely different.
Totally.
And NFL on Fox, huge, reason that changed, not just with their show, but in terms of Jimmy Kimmel being the first person making the picks and doing a segment that's actually made for comedy. I'm jumping timelines. I feel like we're watching The Last Dance and we need one of those timelines going to show you where we're at. Yeah. So so I'm in college and I'm working on my degree at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I try a little bit of stand-up. It doesn't go well because it was at a dance club called Nitro and nobody wanted to watch comedy. They wanted to dance and hook up, essentially. So that was terrible. But I went back and I got up at a club, did really well. I actually hurt my back for a while and I couldn't even walk. And I worked on a bunch of different impressions, got better and better. Nobody doing impressions at the time. I'm coming up. I go into the college circuit. There's nobody doing impressions there. And I'm doing like Chris Farley and Adam Sandler and stuff like that. And the John Madden, saying things, and all the guys are loving the John Madden stuff in the colleges because the Madden football game still has John Madden attached to it at the time. I meet up with somebody, a manager in Los Angeles. I go to Los Angeles. I immediately get offered 5 or 6 different deals and little parts in TV shows and stuff like that. Because when you're new in Los Angeles and nobody's, they feel like they've got this clay they can mold or whatever and put you in different spots and you're interesting to them because you haven't been seen so much.
How did you book yourself on the college circuit, just to understand the business of it? Is it fraternities? Is it the schools themselves?
Well, the schools all have budgets to put together, and then you go to these performance. They're called conventions, NACA conventions. They've changed a little bit, but the National Association of Campus Activities. Somebody had heard about me, told me about an agent who was really big, Joey Edmonds, and he took me on and got me into these NACAs. There's lots of politics that goes on with that stuff. The agents who get people in, so you want to sign with an agent that's known. I started getting 20 and 30 different things, different bookings from these conventions at $750 to $1,000 or $1,200 a pop. When everybody else is making $50 doing comedy, I'm only in it for a year and I'm making $80,000-$90,000 for the year because I have something that nobody else is doing, right? I have the impressions. Now, what I would say that's different about me than a lot of people who do impressions now, if you watch, there's impressions everywhere. They can kind of do them for the screen, but they can't do them in an act because they don't know how to do it in a live situation, which is pressure. And that's just reps. That's a drill versus going and a game time. But again, you get known doing the Instagram posts and TikToks and Twitter, all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit different. The analogy is not exactly the same, but there's still some of that there. But I watch, I'll watch people on TikTok and stuff like that. I go, well, why are Barack Obama and Donald Trump best friends playing sorry? I don't. That's the stuff I fought against my entire career to be liked by other comics. And now the vaudevillian stuff, the Ed Sullivan eating a hamburger is now Donald Trump eating a hamburger, and it's tremendous. This is the #1 hamburger. And people are like, oh, it's incredible. How did you think of that? Well, it's really easy because it's 1940s and 1950s comedy. So I get into
let me ask you one question, Frank, just to kind of go back to the college circuit. Obviously, like we had the evolution, you had Saturday Night Live, you had Tommy Boy. Like, how do you take like a Chris Farley, who I really remember? His brother actually works in the business world, but how did you create that character? How did you develop it? And then how do you know how to activate him on stage in a way
Well,
that's
with an
going to
impression,
engage.
it's already set for you. That's the difference between an impression and an original character. A lot of times, an original character is an impression of somebody nobody else knows, so you can create a little something different with them and mess with it in different ways.
Right.
An impression, what I used to do with Chris Farley was pretty simple. Is I put him in a role that you would never think he was. They kept rebooting Batman movies, so I was like, well, who would you know is Batman if he's playing him? It would be Chris Farley, and I'm my freaking gourd. I'm the Cape Crusader, So that I would do that, and he's amazed by it himself, as the audience is. So they're living through the same experience as him. Yeah. So the audience is having the same experience that Chris Farley, the character, is in his Batman role. So you're kind of telling them what to feel as it's going on. And then I do a little bit of the motivation, go into the motivational speaker type of thing. I lurk in the shadows. I'm a creature of the night. And I have a little bit of what you call a weight problem. So that is another element of even just, recognition for people of that character in the Chris Farley stuff. So in terms of impressions,
because it seems like it takes because you don't have a template. And what I felt kind of fascinated why I wanted to interview you is it was kind of the same thing for me and my partner Chad Bowen with the Yankees. We were entering sports psychology. Well, no teams are looking for help. Athletes are not creatures of self-help. They're not looking to meditate. They're not looking to get better in the traditional ways. So much like we had to figure out what will work, what won't work. All right, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars. We got Chris Winkie, who's older than me. And you're so much trial and error. And I had a place like IMG Academy, 500 acres where I could just fail, and then but learn and get better. Okay, that didn't work. How I guess it's just, I'm sure there are people that tried impressions and couldn't get their way forward. I mean, it's a big thing to get into NACA, get on that college scene. I remember watching all the different things from the Far Side concerts to all the different things they'd bring in. It's hyper competitive on a college, but to create the value proposition and then establish yourself and get to LA. I mean, what skills did it require? Was it a lot of determination? Was it a lot of just?
Well, I'm a grinder, so I would go out. I would be out there doing a ton of press on radio, local television, all that kind of stuff. I would get to a city early as I'm starting to get better and bigger, and before as I go to LA, I'm selling tickets because I'm up at 5 a.m. when nobody else is. I understand the parameters of drive time, which people who might not remember before COVID-19 was between basically 7 and 9, some places between 6 and 10, but that's when all the cars are on the road and most of the radios are on. Now that's been, become a little bit not as dense because everybody's got listen to iPods or podcasts, whatever, not iPods, but listening to their music that they program
when they
for
want.
themselves. Yeah. But it's still the time that you want to be on the radio, or for me, if you want to be on local television, I want to be on at 6 a.m. or 5:30 in the morning, because that's when my audience that's going to work is up and has the TV on in the background, and they might see me. It's not 10 a.m. 10 a.m. is going to be an audience of mothers and families, and that's why they're talking so sweetly to everybody. They're not giving it to you directly. So I want to sell tickets. I want to sell to those the guys and the people who are going, it's not only guys, but it's a lot of guys, right. And because of the sports stuff, and it's people who are going to work, and they're going to be up at that early time. If you understand your audience, and part of that's my broadcasting, education, that I understand that. A lot of comics just go out and, when I get up, I'll do radio. I'd rather do radio at 9:30. I found that actually during this quarantine time, radio's better at 9 because more people are up, because people are getting up later because they don't have to be in the office early. They get up and they can start their workday, and they have the radio on or they have the TV on at home. So that's all changed. So you have to, when it first started happening, and I this whole quarantine thing, I had to read the situation, and I looked, and I was getting up at 7. I was getting no reaction. So, or, which is 4 o'clock my time, 7 o'clock on the East Coast. So I said, well, why am I doing this? I don't even want to get up at this time. And radio producers would say, we'll put you on prime time. I'm like, why? There's no prime time. It doesn't exist anymore because no people aren't bumper to bumper on the freeway.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to recognize everything that's in front of you and then adjust. That's the same thing I'm doing with the internet right now. I'm adjusting to a different world. I was stagnant for a long time because I wasn't trying. I wasn't even trying to be out there. And then I'm like, well, I need to get involved and become part of this new media in the real world. Pat McAfee's one of the guys. We actually talked about you on there. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, Jordan, and you texted me after. I was that.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
Yeah,
that
Jordan
was
Palmer.
Bowl,
so
right?
we were. Yeah, it was great, and and Pat was intrigued by it because I don't think he's ever thought of mental in sports.
Right.
I mean, he's in his own way. He's a complete genius too. So listen, you have to, and that's if there's one thing that I could apply here to a lot of what your audience is, you're talking about being great. We talk about Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson changed the quarterback position, right? The quarterback position started is everybody's trying to draft a 6'4", 6'5", stand in the pocket guy, and that with a big arm, and that was traditional. Nobody was looking for anything different. Along comes Russell Wilson, and a lot of people think they're Russell Wilson, but there are elements to Russell Wilson that people don't understand, and that's adjustment. No, when does Russ get hit? He doesn't, because he knows how to slide, because he plays he played baseball. He also he knows how to be elusive. He's got that extra sense of what's going on. He's reading the situation. Hyper awareness, that the intelligence is beyond, right? A lot of guys have that feeling in the pocket. And they know what's going on, but Russ can do it on the move too, which is another level. And I've heard people say about Russ, I've heard people, people would say you have to stand like Drew Brees on your tippy toes so you can see over everybody. And a friend of mine, Rob Slavens, who worked at one of his camps, was asking us, why you throw with bent legs? Why don't you throw straight legs? He goes, well, I get to where I can see the lane, the throwing lane, and I throw between people.
Yeah.
I don't try to throw over them. So that never occurred to people. Think about that. Think about that level of people thought, I have to throw over the line. And Russ went, well, no, you don't. You move it. It's that, that story about years. I don't even know how long ago it was, maybe 40, 50 years ago, that the United States was working on, and I think this is true, maybe if it's not, but the United States was working on a pen that would write upside down, and the Russians used a pencil. It's simplicity sometimes. Don't try and throw over when you can't. Go to the side. Everybody else tries to go to the goes around people. Why wouldn't the quarterback? Because we got stuck in this, one track mental, one way of thinking, and everybody did the same way. And listen, it's amazing how you go back and you watch some of this football stuff, but some of the old school stuff is still there. There are still old school coaches. There's new school coaches. Sometimes the old school coaches can beat the new school guys, but it's even how college is evolving into and it's all adjustment.
You only know what you know unless you're willing to learn more. And what I love what you're saying is, at the end of the day, you understood early on who your audience was going to be, found a way to grind and get them. And even now, as we're facing the unique challenges, one of the toughest thing is people are living backwards. Like, when's it going to go? We're not going back that way.
Right.
So how can the idea of neutral is like, look, man, this shit's real, but it's not predictive. So what I do, not how I feel, is gonna change things. So how I feel about, God, I gotta do 10 o'clock. Well, great, I'm gonna do 10. I get to sleep until 7. This makes sense. And if people start driving again, I'll shift back to 4:30. But so I love that you understand, you develop it, you develop the awareness, you get out to LA, and how do you take that next step when you get to Los Angeles?
So I just started going into rooms. I mean, this is around 2000. I started going in and doing a bunch of stuff, a bunch of impressions back to back. Nobody had seen in front of casting directors, not even what they were looking for, but they're like, wow, that's unique. We can try and put you in some different.
What were
stuff.
Some of those early ones that
I met at Warner Brothers at the WB at the time. I ended up getting a WB deal, and it became something called Hype that didn't really go the way I wanted to. But MTV offered me a small part on a sketch show. Everybody was offering me sketch shows. I wasn't offered Mad TV. Mad TV wanted me. I was offered a deal at NBC. The president of NBC said, "Do we want me to put you on Saturday Night Live?" And I was like, "It'll be an option. It would be an option." And my manager's like, "How do you say it would be an option?" I'm like, "Well, you told me," I said to my manager, I go, "You told me that he wasn't really put you on Saturday Night Live. It's Lorne Michaels, and they want to find you." I said, "Well, so he wasn't really offering it to me. He was just asking it kind of vaguely to see where I wanted to go." And I went, "Why should I show my cards?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's exactly the right answer. But I didn't believe anybody would ever not show their cards in that situation." I was like, "Well, you told me not to, and I didn't. So, it wasn't the right place for me at the time too, because Daryl Hammond was there and Jimmy Fallon was just starting. So I would have been third on the totem pole as people who had this niche of some of the impression stuff. So I end up doing the deal, and I go to Warner Brothers, or I do the Warner Brothers deal. I do that show. It starts out pretty strong and then falls apart. And then I go do Mad TV for a few years. Because of the John Madden impression, I get the NFL on Fox. Jimmy Kimmel brings me on. I'm a part of his thing. He leaves, goes to do his show, and then I take over for him after auditioning with there were some great people who auditioned for that. Jeff Dunham did it with the Puppets. I'm trying to think. There were a few other people that were really great. Billy Gardell and Craig Robinson did a point counterpoint thing, and I was the one who ended up getting the job because it just seemed like it was the most different from Jimmy. I mean, there's luck. There's always luck involved. Then you have to take the luck. You have to take the uniqueness and the luck and apply it, and then keep driving forward. Now, my difficulty was I was complacent and happy with that. I was like, I didn't think I was ever going to. All I ever really wanted to be was a talk show guest. I didn't want to be a talk show host. I wanted to be a talk show guest. So it's about, in LA, you get certain places, and business is like everything. This is probably how you think too, in terms of championships. You get the best, the biggest, the people with the championship mentality, they don't stop at one championship. They're not, Russ isn't happy with that. Russ, Drew Brees isn't happy with that. That's what drives them to get more. And sometimes when you have some success early, and I always believed in being a well-rounded person, and I had a family and little kids, and I was missing some of that stuff. So I did what was right for me at the time, and I wouldn't go back and change it because I have a great relationship with my kids. But people say, why were you not doing this and that? I go, I have kids, and I don't live in Los Angeles. I didn't want to raise my kids there, so it is what it is. I don't blame other people. I go and say, hey, this is me. But if you want to learn positives and negatives from me, like I help mentor some other people as they're coming up. I go, well, here's where I made a mistake. If you want to succeed later, but if you're happy, you can be happy in lots of different ways. I mean, there's nothing wrong with plateauing and staying there. I make millions of dollars. I mean, I have. I mean, over the years, and I have a great life. I don't really have to work. I've saved a lot of money. But I'm not everybody, but luck plays into that. And so does determination. I could be much richer. I could probably be much more successful in a lot of people's eyes in a broader sense. And, I'm kind of fighting. I'm getting some of that, Rocky 3 or Rocky 4 back where, it's like, okay, I make some effort. That's why I'm on the internet all the time now. It's doing lots of different stuff. I'm using the niche that, people know me for. I was trying to get away from it. It's like, okay, I got to rebuild with this first because younger people don't even know who I am. So I rebuild with that, and then I'll try and, broaden out again.
Dude, what was, when you got to the NFL and Fox, knowing how big that was, and, like what people don't understand is there was a time where the only thing was the game, right? And then everything around the game, and you've been on, obviously, College Game Day and all those things, but now you're on the NFL and Fox, Kimmel's moved on. Like, did you have that sense that you'd arrived? Like, you were so far beyond anybody sort of in your industry?
No, because I thought I was going to get fired every week there. Every week I thought I was going to be fired there for 9 years. I thought I was going to be fired the next week. It was a weird thing because there's nobody else that's doing it. And you don't know. I mean, I don't know. My dad always told me I don't have enough confidence in anything I do. So maybe that played into it. I never looked at it. I always looked at it as like I was fine and content with what I was doing. but it really wasn't my life's goal, which was to be not really sports, although I knew sports. If I'd have grown up knowing theater, I probably would have ventured a little bit more into that. But the sports niche, and it's, time is everything. Malcolm Gladwell too, right? I mean, the 10,000 hours and opportunity. When it all comes down to it, yeah, and I'm sure you talk about a lot about that. We've talked. You and I have even talked a little bit about that type of stuff. It's, listen, if you don't come along at the right time. Look, Michael Jordan. We just watched The Last Dance. Mm-hmm. Michael Jordan comes along at a time where the NBA is in a certain amount of countries. I don't know what it is, but it's a national sport. David Stern takes over right at about the same time. You're on the heels of Magic and Bird. They're stars, but they're not mega stars, right? Then all of a sudden they're tying into commercials. Nike's, he turned down, Adidas turned him down. That you learn this stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The other shoes companies, Converse, Adidas, they turn him down. Nike isn't Nike without Michael Jordan, right? They're just out there in Oregon doing, nothing. Maybe they don't even exist anymore. When Nike first came out, I remember being in my sandbox in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Somebody gets what's the Nike? Is that what that is? Nike? Nobody even knew what it was. Then Jordan comes around and it just changes the face of everything. But, African-American athletes at that time in the U.S., all of a sudden given more credence, and people are, as much as there are issues with all that stuff, racial tensions and things like that. This is a time where Michael Jordan is actually going beyond that for some people, and and broadening and making society better and more understanding. There's so much that goes into Michael Jordan that you don't. He wasn't just a basketball player. He was a intergalactic star.
Yeah, and what's interesting about and Coach Wooden used to always say, luck is when preparation meets that opportunity. And it's interesting that you had that sense of it takes what it takes to be a good parent. So if I live in Arizona and I work in LA, like there's only, a unique balance. I heard a statistic a couple of years ago, pre-quarantine, that the average married couple spoke 27 minutes a week. And I'd always laugh because my buddies be like, that much? Damn, when do I find all that time? But, in order to develop a good relationship, you've got to make time. In order to develop a relationship with your kids, who I know are huge priorities to you, you've got to make time. And then in order to do the job, like you did, you got to get up on 5. Just promoting the book, Frank, I had 3 days where I did 16 radio shows like a day. And I literally just wanted to go play in traffic. Like, I was not built to handle, here I'm in Michigan, here I'm in Wisconsin, here I'm in New York, and I'm on, whatever, and I just get a call sheet and a number dials me. That's hard, and I'm talking about the book for.
It's the up and the down too. People don't realize the mental. You got to go put on a show. Yeah. Then you're done. Then you're gonna put on another show. You don't know what you've said already. There's a lot that goes on that. And listen, it's better. I worked at a golf course digging sand traps and there's different types of hard work. But people, again, to tie it into professional sports, and people don't understand how much work something becomes. It looks like it's a game, and it is fun in the moment. But the ice you have to put on your knees when you're 6'9" and 230, 250 pounds. After the game and all the prep, it's a job in itself, just getting ready to play that day. And then after you're done playing. So it's like 3 jobs. And same thing with, comedy or anything is you talk to the elite in the world at something. I had Brian Callen on my podcast this week, and Callen was just talking about, you talk to somebody who's elite at something, you find out how little you know about a subject. You talk to a baseball player and you say, well, you line up your knuckles this the way. They're like, that's thinking about, 10 years ago. We do this now so we can get the upwards, and with the analytics, we're trying to just swing up and get home runs because the percentages, and that's better for the team. And in general, you're not hitting ground balls. You're not hitting into double plays, less outs. It's stuff that you don't even think about, but they all know. And then it's all just ingrained and becomes trained.
What have you, last couple of questions from my perspective. Like, what have you learned about greatness? I mean, in terms of being around so many people that are exceptional, you're a very observant personality, so I'm sure, like, yes, you have your times when you're on, but you're watching JB, or you're watching athletes, or you're watching different types of people, or business people, or people behind the scenes that are producing shows. What are a couple of those characteristics?
I'm going to tell you the biggest one, and that I wasn't willing to, because I wanted to be more well-rounded. Sacrifice. Sacrifice is probably, if you want to be the best at something, you're going to have to sacrifice something, whether it's relationships, your own personal time, your personal life. Sacrifice. The people who are the best, and you might be able to challenge me on this with Russell Wilson, because he does. Listen, I just know, because I know behind the scenes he works more than anybody can tell. For as successful as he is and as driven as he is, he's as well-rounded as you could be. And I'm sure he could be better at a lot of things and be more well-rounded, but he's sacrificing something. It's just, he's at such an elite level. We don't see as much of what he sacrificed, but there is sacrifice. Russell Wilson, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, I think Russell Wilson's a happy guy, a content guy, but he could be even more content and happy in other ways, but he knows that's going to happen eventually too. Right?
Yeah,
when you're
right.
Now is the time. You have a window to be the greatest. And if there's one guy who's unsung in all of the NFL, there was that list that came out that had Russell as like the 33rd best player in the NFL. I mean, it's insane.
Yep.
Who would not draft Russ now of all quarterbacks? You know, who would not draft, if you don't draft him 1 or 2, he's in the top 5 at least. And I'm talking about just because of all time. If you know what Brady's going to be, you know what Russ is going to be. And even this game, the game that's played, because it's evolving. But for somebody, you talk about neutral thinking. If I'm him, I don't even look at that stuff for care. I think he's at a point where, and you can tell me again if I'm wrong, it can't even drive him, because he drives himself. He wants to win for himself.
Well, and it's been, I mean, you know, think about being first team all ACC and your coach telling you, hey, we're going to go with Mike Glennon, graduate early, you know, and obviously that was Wisconsin's benefit. Unfortunately not Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Madison. But you know, if you were Al Pacino and you wanted to give Russell some advice of how to deal with the doubters, give me something that I can share with Russ of Al Pacino telling him how to keep overlooking all these people that seem to doubt him, Frank. That's the only impression I'm going to ask you to do.
Russ, just keep doing what you're doing. Focus. Stay on you. Outside doesn't matter. All that noise means nothing, because when it comes down to that play on the field, when it comes down to doing what you got to do, they don't make one bit of sense to you, because you're it. It's you alone standing there. And guess what? You got it.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask you, particularly for people in the business world that travel a lot, and I have another thing, like, what have you learned working in your industry, traveling, having to be about parenting, about that process of being a good, great, successful professional business person and an entertainer, and yet making the time to also be a dad and a husband?
Well, it's a lot easier now with FaceTime and Skype and stuff like that. When I first started, you couldn't see each other. So to just communicate back and forth. I mean, I've done homework over FaceTime with, I've helped with homework over FaceTime because my wife isn't, she tapped out at about 3rd grade. So, yeah, I think it's just keeping interactive, letting them know that you're thinking about them. That's, part of it for me. By the time my kids needed me, I was working less and making choices. Now again, I was in a different situation than a lot of people. Some people, you have to go and you have to be out there 5 days a week. You might have to be out there months. Think about somebody in the military traveling overseas, and you just, that's months, and you can't. But for me, anytime I could, I would try and spend time, whether it was a phone call or FaceTime, and have that and keep that relationship going, because that was important to me and still is. And that's the only thing I could say, because there's nothing really you can do outside of that. Again, most people are just trying to survive.
But consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure they know who you are and that you're there for them. And the reason you're out there working is for their benefit too.
And your best advice for people who have been successful and are trying to either sustain or reinvent themselves, but now are facing technology, facing Zoom, facing all these things. What's your best advice for embracing the new, particularly as we go into this new phase, or somebody that maybe the skills that made them good 10 years ago aren't the same now, but they still have the ability to perform?
Well,
what's your best advice?
Live in the present and look for the future, because looking back and saying things like this isn't how it used to be does nothing for you, because it's not going back. It's not. Everything has changed in many ways. Even if, as people start to, if there's a vaccine or whatever, and people start to congregate more and are closer together, this has changed everything for everybody. There's going to be a lot more teleconferencing. There's some positives that have come out of this. You don't have to go to your doctor's office to get a prescription refilled anymore.
Yep.
They're finally embracing the fact that they could have done this a long time ago and didn't. And now you can have teleconference office visits. I mean, there's all kinds of it. And think about people in terms of, fossil fuels and stuff like that. All the teleconferencing we can do saves on all the gas and all the everything. So there are some positives. The negatives are, it's changing a lot of lives, and people don't like to change. You look at your championship people, Trevor, they all have to evolve and change unless they're so good. People think that Belichick doesn't evolve. You better believe he does. They play a different defense for every team. They change their schemes more than anybody else. They're changing constantly. They just don't talk about it to let you know about it. And you don't have to tell everybody what you're doing. Sometimes just doing it is better than telling people that you're doing. I believe in that. I believe just go out and do it. Don't tell my son. He keeps telling me, hey, I'm going to do this. Quit telling me what you're going to do. Just go do it. I'll see you doing it. Then you don't even have to tell me you did it, because I saw it happen. And that's what I'm impressed with, seeing it happen. Because you know how many people tell me they're going to try stand-up comedy? Everybody. I'm going to try that someday. You know how many don't? Most of them. Because they don't get out there and do it. You have to force yourself to do it, and then it starts to happen.
And last question is this idea of being neutral. What does that mean to Frank Caliendo? The idea of finding that middle ground and being a neutral thinker.
Well, listen, to me, and I try to teach my kids this too. I watch. I'm gonna tie this back to sports, because this is one of the things I saw, especially with Russ. All right, Russell Wilson throws an interception. What's the look on Russell Wilson's face?
Yep, doesn't change.
This, and you're in trouble. Your quarterback's in trouble. You see this face. You see too much of that, the game is over at that point. Because this bleeds onto everybody else. And this becomes, what are you now? And it's internal and it's external. This is like, I screwed up. Shit, I screwed up. I'm going to fix it. If I don't get to fix it this time, I'm going to fix it next time. That video I watched, Russ throwing the pick at the end of the Super Bowl, that was right in front of me. I was there. So, that was insane. I'm thinking, oh God, I love this guy. But then to see him afterward, and he's like, hey, I gotta, you could fall into the depths, that none of us could even understand, because that's the biggest stage. But he doesn't, and he keeps going. And I think for me, I try not to get too high and too low either. Sometimes, I'm being totally honest here. I think neutral is the absolute way to go. You have to have a little bit of ups and downs in there to feel it. Neutral isn't just here. It's a range. It's a little bit of a range, but the wave is this. It's not this.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
Neutral's in here. It's like when you expand, the audio on something. It looks like it's just a line, but you expand it as it goes out, and you see that it's actually in here, and that's where it's going from.
Yeah.
And for me, listen, I've had great things happen for me. I've had terrible things. For me, neutral thinking was actually being more well-rounded. I needed that. Yep. So I had to have an element of my family, because if the career stuff was going down, I had family to keep me happy. If family was driving me a little bit crazy, I had career stuff that I could go to. So for me, neutral was actually you've seen really sad comedians that it ends badly because all they had was that one thing.
Right.
Comedy's a weird thing that way. It might be that way in sports. I think I don't see it as much as I see it.
We saw a little bit with Michael Phelps recently talking about how all he was a swimmer and not being well-rounded. That identity seems like you've done a really good job of broadening your identity.
Yeah. And it can be a little, listen, you have to make choices, and that can save you mentally. It can hurt you in your career a little bit if you're at the highest level, but you have to find what's right for you. And maybe that's a certain thing you're meant to be. I mean, some people are happy making $250,000 a year. Some people are like, you only made $250,000.
Right.
And some people are like, I can't believe you made $250,000. That's incredible. Doing that. You love that. Everybody looks at it from different perspectives. Right. And I never look, so one of the things I always do to stay neutral for myself too, is I find myself, I find this happening every once in a while. I talked about this slightly. I touched on it with the Al Pacino thing. The happiest I am is when I focus on what I'm doing. When I focus on what I'm doing and I worry about that, what can I do for me and what can I control and what can I work on moving forward? When I start to worry on how did this person get this, or why is that person in that movie, that does nothing for you other than put you down. In social media, that's the thing that happens to kids, and why social media is so, because everybody's lying about what they're doing anyways and how great their lives are. But focus on you, and you are going to drive yourself forward. Focus on what everybody else is doing, and you're just going to bring yourself down and have negative thoughts.
Yeah.
What am I doing to move myself forward? How can I do that? And can other outside influence be used to drive you? Sure. But for me, no. For me, I'm happiest when I'm thinking about, I did something really good there. And if I didn't do something great there, I did something poorly, I'm like, got to fix that. Yeah. But if I'm worried about this person did this and that, I'm like, I get obsessed on that. And I'm like, why am I only doing this? I'm fine. I'm fine. And stop worrying about other people.
And you made that choice. And, Frank, just first of all, thanks again for making the time. And it kind of proves, remember the first time I heard Olympic gold medalist Michael Johnson speak when IMG brought him in, and all I knew was the gold shoes. And this guy talked for an hour. And so much of what he was talking about had nothing to do with running. But I was like, this guy could run Microsoft as much as he could run, be a number one in the world for 11 years. And I think that idea of you have such a good understanding of, sort of where you're at and why you're there and when you need to push it and when you need to back down. And I've always been, just as friends, so appreciative of the level of investment you have in your family, and just being really good at what you do. And I think it's fascinating for people that are listening. There was no roadmap to your career. You had to find a way, following characteristics that you learned that drove success, but then, making those characteristics relevant to the field you wanted to go into, and that is not easy to do. And I have great empathy for that. And, I chose sports, which sounds cool, but you don't make a lot of money in sports, right? Because coaches feel like, hey, you're lucky to be here with us. And so my metric was relevance, that the night before the national championship, I'm relevant with our players in whatever that capacity is, or the morning or the day in the summer. And then ultimately to be able to move more into the business world where, it's different. And the financial metrics are different and things from that perspective. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you from Russell, from my perspective. And let's hope that you stay safe. Let's hope that Arizona stays some version of safe. And for people that want to follow you, Frank, on social media and learn more besides YouTube and all the things, how can they stay in touch with what you're doing today?
At Frank Caliendo on all the social media platforms. If you can't spell Caliendo, it's the letter C, the word alien, and the word do, at Frank C. Alien Do. And the Caliendo Cast podcast, we've had some people, like some great people, Harlan Coben, the author, who's sold 80 million books. Just had Brian Callen. We just did a Bill Walton episode. There's a lot of great people. We get into little bits of, I don't have the expertise that you do in this stuff, but you start to see traits from people, the types of stuff we've talked about here that I've heard you talk about before with some of the elite people in business and sports, and you start to see those traits. Tony Robbins, Ed Milet, two guys I've spent some time. You just spent some time with Ed Milet.
I just did Ed's show, yeah.
There are traits you see in people, and you go, "Oh my gosh, you make lists. You make lists, and you make check marks with the list." That's why you get things done. Because you visualize it, you put it in front of you, and you actually know when you're getting something done, as opposed to me half the time just thinking about things. It's amazing what can be done if you physicalize something.
Well, how would we'll let you be Tony Robbins and just close this podcast for us.
I don't have it to my Tony Robbins. Oh, Tony Robbins. I don't know. We'll just close with Adam Sandler. Get thinking, make yourself better.
Hey, thank you so much. Look forward to staying in touch. And let's also be in touch about an opportunity, A, for myself, and B, for Russell to join you.
Yeah, awesome, man.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Appreciate it.
DJ, we're going to head back to you.
So what'd you think? That was pretty awesome, huh? Thanks, Frank. And also thank you, Trevor. Frank, just seeing your career and how you talk about your life and your career and the things that you learn, and also the things that you've applied by hanging out and being around some of the greats was really helpful. And we appreciate you for that. You guys can chat in the chat room still. We're going to keep that open for about 10 minutes, and we love how you engage there. And we're just excited for all of you to be on this webinar and to continue this journey as we find our way through. So with that, off to the chat room.